Well, Ulysses, typically we do our mailbags on Wednesday. We do the midweek mailbag, but it is the off season, so we're playing around, trying out some different things, and why not? Let's do a mailbag on our Friday.
Well, our Fridays are fun Fridays, and is there anything better than mailbags? I don't think so. And besides, we had to do the 40-man crunch series, which we've gotten really positive feedback from people, and we really appreciate that. Drop your comments on those videos if you haven't checked them out. They're 1, 2, 3-parter, so make sure to watch those, and of course, hit like and subscribe. And let's get started with this fun Friday right now.
You are Locked On Rays, your daily Tampa Bay Rays podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, my name is Kevin Weiss.
I'm Ulises Sambrano.
And we are the host of the Locked On Rays podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for making Locked On Rays your very first listen every day. And remember, Locked On Rays is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube at Locked On Rays. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram and send us an email. Get us those mailbag questions, off-season mailbag questions, or voice memos. We take those too, lockedonrays@gmail.com. Listen, before we dive into the mailbag here, I should note regarding the 3-episode 40-man arc, if you will, please, if you're a listener out there, if you're going to listen to them all, which we encourage you to do, please do it in order. Otherwise, it probably won't make a lot of sense. Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. Part 1 dropped on Tuesday, Part 2 on Wednesday, Part 3 on Thursday.
Thank you for mentioning that, because I'm afraid that people are going to be like, what are they talking about? So, like, yes, please do listen to them in order. It's not like Star Wars. You can't just do episode 1. You should do episode 4. Okay, let's go original trilogy here, and then you can go back to whatever that was in the early 2000s. But yeah, please do it in order: 1, 2, 3, and again, that was the big picture. But of course, we didn't even touch. We kind of did touch on non-tender candidates. We didn't talk about the deadline because it's a little bit past the Rule 5 protection. I think it's December 1st. But of course, we're going to talk about non-tender possibly next week. And, I did drop a name there, JT Shagwa, that could be a non-tender candidate. So there's a lot to talk about, people. There's a lot to talk about. And of course, we have player reviews coming up, Kevin. We love those.
We do indeed. Yes. Player reviews. We have to, I guess, determine who makes the cut for those player reviews. And, of course, the non-tender question is very important as well. I think the Rays have 19 arbitration-eligible players.
Yeah. Most in MLB. Most. Yeah.
I mean, it's not surprising because the Rays typically have a lot of pre-arb guys that go into arbitration instead of signing guys out of free agency outright.
I know that we won't have trivia or name that war. I know, bad spoiler, bad plot twist here today. But I will make a quick organic trivia for all of you. Kevin, do you know how much money is estimated, according to the Tampa Bay Times, our friend Mark Topkin, for all of those 19? What it would be the combined bottom line for all of those 19 guys? I made the math.
Wow, that's a great question. 19 guys. What's the average arbitration figure? I'm going to say like between $50 to $60 million.
Close, but again, we're talking Rays baseball.
Okay, so $40 million, $30 to $40 million. Drop it down a couple pegs.
$42,045,000. $42,045,000.
So in other words, the Rays will not be bringing back all 19 arbitration-eligible players.
Probs not, and we'll talk about that later on, people.
We will. Not on this episode, but later on in the future on Locked On Rays. All right, let's dive into these mailbag questions. This first one from Jeff Ardle. He says, I love that you covered part of this the other day. What if we just kept these 3 players we had? Jake Cronenworth at second, Nate Lowe at first, and Travis d'Arnaud at catcher. Their numbers and salaries versus what we have now, would we still be playing, as in playing in the playoffs? Thank you, Jeff in Dunedin. Dunedin, a very underrated town and city in the Tampa Bay area, I might add. Very hidden gem with all that. But yeah, Cronenworth, Lowe, Travis d'Arnaud. First thing that comes to mind is if the Rays had all those three players in the fold, perhaps the Rays would still be playing playoff baseball. Additionally, we wouldn't be droning on and on about the lack of offense. They wouldn't have to probably necessarily go into the free agent pool in 2023 and look for a name or multiple names. They would theoretically have all that shored up.
Yeah, Jeff, I guess, chose violence today on a Friday morning. So thank you, Jeff, for that. Just kidding. Jeff in Dunedin. Thank you for writing to us. Man, this is some like Marvel alternate universe what if episode. Like, oh man, look, let's go one by one. Jake Cronenworth. He's a utility guy, really, but a second baseman. He's a second baseman who is put into other situations just because the team knows that he's capable of doing them, but it's not because he excels at them. Right. In fact, I looked at his numbers. I believe Jake Cronenworth only played 8 games at shortstop and 13 games in first base. So the rest were basically his second base position. So in this particular season, yeah, he would have been a fantastic upgrade as a replacement for Brendan Lowe. But then again, somebody needed to be out of the roster. So who could that be? Would it that meant what? Less time for Isaac Paredes, less time for Taylor Walls. Again, I don't think it could have been Taylor Walls because who would have been at shortstop? Would you have then just put Jake Cronenworth at shortstop instead, and then just put Isaac Paredes at second, and then forego the defensive side at shortstop by putting Cronenworth there? I don't know.
Well, that you go back. I mean, if we're really diving deep into this, if the Rays have Jake Cronenworth on the roster, they may not have gone after Isaac Paredes at that point in the trade market, or if they did, I mean, if it's between Jake Cronenworth and Isaac Paredes, it's Jake Cronenworth that's getting the playing time. It's a 4-war player. It's a 4-war player that's arbitration eligible for the first time this year. And what's really frustrating about it, which we've expressed, is the Rays traded him and Tommy Pham for Hunter Renfroe and slap blank prospect Xavier Edwards. Those are Blake Snell's words, not mine. Pham didn't really work out with San Diego, so okay, that is what it is. What's really disappointing is that Renfroe did not work out in the least at all with the Rays. I know it was during the pandemic season, but he just didn't seem like a good culture fit either. And then he goes on to Boston and Milwaukee, and it's like, that's the player that the Rays needed, that Hunter Renfroe, the Hunter Renfroe of 2021 and 2022, not of 2020. And I guess where he sort of fell off the table in the second half of 2019 with the Padres before getting shipped off to the Rays. That's what's so frustrating about it.
100%. And I know we would probably have enough time to talk about this in the offseason. Put a pedestal of worst trades since 2008. I think the Cronenworth people would get a lot of votes. We'll put it on Twitter and get other Rays fans' take on it. But that's a bad trade. Right. I mean, Xavier Edwards would have to become, which again, if you want to know his numbers and his comparison to Taylor Walls, please listen to part 3 of the 40-man crunch after you listen to part 1 and part 2. But anyway, I digress. Xavier Edwards would have to be a 3-war player to be like, okay, that worked out, but still, like it's a bad trade. It was a bad trade.
And then Nate Lowe, of course, traded to the Rangers for Heriberto Hernandez, Oslevis Basabe, who we've mentioned and is picking it up in the minors, and Alexander Ulises. Again, I think it's still too soon to determine who has won or lost that trade. But if you're in win now mode and you're trying to do things now and you need a guy that can bop out 27 homers, now that would be Nate Lowe. So there's that's what is the difficult thing about that deal. Will it ultimately pay off? I still remain confident that it can, just based on the skill set of Basabe and Hernandez. I think is could be a little something. But like you've said before, Ulises, prospects are lottery tickets, so you never know. And Nate Lowe, again, won't be arbitration eligible till 2024. And he plug and play with him. He solves your offense problem. He solves your first base problem as well.
Nate Lowe means no Ji-Man Choi. We did have Bryce Patrick from Locked On Rangers on the show in September, and unprompted, even though he went on to wax poetic about Nathaniel Lowe's offensive prowess, unprompted, Bryce said, boy, but he can't catch a thing. Like, that's without even saying a thing. Like, a guy was having a heck of a season with the bat, and unprompted, he goes, boy, but he can't catch. So would you take Nate Lowe's offensive production? I think we would all say yes. And then if he were to be a Jonathan Aranda looking type of defense at first base, it would get tough to swallow the offensive production better. So I think that one isn't as a clear dunk like it is with Jay Cronenworth. But overall, I think, yes, that would make the team ultimately better.
Yes, and again, I think there's multiple factors with that. If the Rays realize that, okay, he can't really crack it at first base, what's amazing is that they even gave him a shot at third for a time. That was a disaster. But, maybe he was a guy that, hey, I got to play in the field. I got to play in the field consistently. I can't do this DH thing. And something that I don't mean to go on too long here, but something has to be said about having Nathaniel Lowe and Josh Lowe in the same organization. And when one of those brothers gets traded away, how does that impact one or the other or both of them combined? We talk about, the game is just played on a spreadsheet, but the mental support angle and stability angle has to count for something. When you literally lose your brother to another organization like that and probably didn't expect it. That can't be easy in the least. And then, of course, like Jeff mentioned, Travis d'Arnaud, this was not a trade. This was just a fact of letting him walk in free agency to the Atlanta Braves. And based on the money that the Braves keep giving to
everyone,
Travis d'Arnaud and the multi-year contracts and the extensions, that they like them some Travis d'Arnaud.
Yeah, and I think all Rays fans were kind of disillusioned and disappointed that the Rays didn't pursue Travis after seeing his 2019 season. And in fact, there are audios, not videos, because we were not on YouTube back then. But if you go back to 2019, if you've got this much time on your hands, you can go back on your podcast platform that you listen to this and go to 2019, and we talk exclusively about they need to pursue Travis d'Arnaud. They need to sign Travis d'Arnaud, and boy, would he have been helpful in the 2020 World Series when Mike Zunino wasn't hitting the side of the barn with a Boeing 727 or 757, whatever they are. Okay. He would have been helpful in 2020. Then in 2021, Zunino and Travis d'Arnaud, you can lick your thumbs because that's going to be delicious. And then 2022, I mean, do I need to say more about how maybe, it got better in the end, but Mejia Betancourt is not the worst, but you add Travis d'Arnaud there, that's a whole different dimensional of a lineup.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's a 3-WAR player and basically an 800 OPS guy. He made the All-Star game this year for the first time in his career. And I'm looking at it right now. You look at d'Arnaud, you look at Lowe, and you look at Cronenworth. That's basically like 10.5 WAR that you would have added to the Rays from 2022. So that's pretty remarkable from that perspective. Also, I don't necessarily know off the top of my head what Travis d'Arnaud's splits are against righties, but Nate Lowe and Jay Cronenworth, both lefties we've talked about, and we know the ineptitude of the Rays offense versus right-handed pitchers, that theoretically could have solved that problem as well. So not to bring it too down, too moody on an off-season mailbag episode. Hopefully we have more of a livened up question number 2 here. But before we get to that, we have to tell you about BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for betting football and the start of the new basketball season that pertains to college basketball and NBA as well. And I think you can bet on international ball too if you want. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcast, and in-depth analysis on every single game. As always, BetOnline is your continued source for all your sport wagering info with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every single sport that is out there. I mean, we talked about basketball, football, MLB, MMA, boxing, golf, so much more as well. So be sure you head over to their website today, or you can use that mobile device of yours to learn more. Bet online, it is where the game starts.
Kevin, before we continue, I just want to say this because I know there will be a snarky comment. There's a snarky up comment. It's coming.
Oh, yeah.
That says, if you would have called up Jake Cronenworth, it probably would have been for Mike Brasso. And if Mike Brasso doesn't get called up and then he doesn't in 19, then he doesn't have the spot in 20, which means that he doesn't have the magical moment with Chapman. I get it. I understand that. But couldn't Cronenworth also have some magic in him? My goodness.
Yes. Question. Before we move on to this next question, I guess, I don't know if we're going to be able to get through all 3, quite frankly.
Maybe
but
not.
If Jake Cronenworth, Nate Lowe, and Travis d'Arnaud had been on the team since when was the Cronenworth trade made? 2019?
After the 2019 season.
Okay. So let's assume that Cronenworth, Lowe, d'Arnaud were on the Rays and performing for them in 2020, 2021, 2022. Okay. Would the Rays have had a ring?
I mean, again, he was a 771 OPS guy, Nate Lowe, last year. So it wasn't like he was a weak bat. Imagine Nate Lowe in the playoffs. I mean, it was just a bounce and a half that got the Rays out from the ALDS against the Red Sox. Yeah. I mean, again, the Houston Astros were a machine last year too, but they faltered in the end, right? So I would take that lineup. Oh, man, it's just that 2021 lineup will be unforgettable. It was so DEEP. My goodness.
Yes, it was. All right. Samuel Bayless has a question about the designated hitter. Just want to get your thoughts on the universal DH. Do you think it has made a difference in this postseason? I haven't heard anyone really talking about it in commentary. Cheers. Sam from a little suburb called Heathcote in Sydney, Australia. So a little bit further from Dunedin, from us anyway.
Well, Sam Bayless, I'll tell you what, if I'm ever in Sydney, Australia, I'll make sure to check out Heathcote and DM you and be like, hey, show me around that suburban Heathcote.
I guarantee that Curtis Mead knows about Heathcote in Sydney.
Perhaps he does. He does. Man, I think I would have to just go with the boldest Exhibit A. Yes, the Universal DH has been fantastic this year, and I'll say for one World Series team, and that is, of course, the Philadelphia Phillies with Bryce Harper. The guy had been injured, so he didn't play in the field that much in 2022. Then he really gets hurt and is out for half of the season after Blake Snell nailed him with a fastball and the thumb. But he's been a DH, man, for the majority of the season. So, and you saw what he did in the NLDS. You saw what he did in the NLCS. This is the biggest universal DH bump up that any team could have gotten, is a superstar who you want to get at bats and doesn't get in trouble and gets suspended for other things. You know what I'm talking about? He gets to take at bats for his team and do something, and that's Bryce Harper. And so I think, Sam, this has been huge for the Philadelphia Phillies.
I think the Phillies have gotten the biggest bump of anybody with the universal DH coming through the pipeline, particularly like you mentioned um, with Bryce Harper, but also it gives them a cushion of rotating if and when Harper's able to play in the outfield again, probably next season or whatever. That we know Kyle Schwarber isn't necessarily the most sure-handed, nor is Nick Castellanos. So you can kind of get creative with moving those guys and shifting those guys around in that role, maybe among others too. But it's funny if you look across, and I read a recent article about the universal DH and the effect on the National League. You are, because of that, seeing less strategy, of course, no double switches, less bunting, and a lot of these teams in the National League or at least for this first year, have taken the Rays approach of, all right, we're not just signing one guy. We're not just signing Nelson Cruz to be the full-time DH. It's a DH by committee. It's a rotation, if you will, of that spot. You don't see a lot of full-time DHs with that role. Will that change in the future as they figure out how they can best maximize it? Perhaps, but I also think there's something to be said for, okay, Schwarber needs a night off or needs rest from his legs. Same thing with Castellanos, Harper. I mean, you just go down the list. It really becomes a nice, hey, we still want to keep this productive bat in the lineup, but we also want to, keep him healthy for 162, the lower body, that is.
Yeah, and I think the Rays have to do it. I think other teams might think it's a good idea, but the Rays have to do it because of the turf. Most especially, those legs are going to get hurt, man, and so you're playing on concrete basically. So they have to do that for the DH role. Again, they didn't do it in 2021, and boy, was that nice to have that offense. I'll always dream about the 2021 offense.
Yes.
And I think every Rays fan will if they were into it as much as obviously we were. But yeah, the universal DH for the Phillies has been a godsend, and look, it's got him to the to not only the playoffs, obviously to the playoffs, but to the World Series. To the World Series, and they just need 4 wins. It's amazing. The Phillies are 4 wins away from being the World Series champions of not 08, of not 09, of not 2010, of 2022. Yeah. Are we serious? Like that has to be the biggest plot twist in a while.
Yeah, again, it's not necessarily the best team on paper that wins the whole damn thing. You got to play the games, and sometimes it's the team that's come on strong and is riding a hot streak, and the Phillies certainly have done that.
Don't get me wrong, though. I mean, don't get me wrong. The Braves, that was a great story. They weren't even 500 until what, August, and
the Nationals in 2019.
Nationals.
Yeah,
exactly. The Nationals 19-33 record. So they were talking about firing Dave Martinez on MLB radio, which this guy, I hate that program. It's so. Ugh.
Who's the guy? Call him out. Who is it? Or who was it?
I think it was at 4 p.m. Is it his last name was it an S?
Casey Stern.
Yes, that guy. Oh, he is the worst.
He's not on this show anymore. Actually, I think he was dealing with some sort of domestic issue or some.
Okay, well,
I think it was his wife or ex-wife that was just bonkers. So I kind of feel bad for the guy. But
okay. I'm sorry about that, Casey. But your takes were awful. He was always like Mad Dog Russo without the yelling. It was like, all right, this doesn't even like get me that angry. It's just upsetting. Anyway,
Casey Stern, by the way, the grandson of Howard Stern. I don't know if you knew that or not.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's
what
I just made it up. They're both on Sirius XM, so I did include that. But
I was like, the ages don't match whatsoever. How old was he when he had his first son?
I should have said son, I guess. Yeah, that's true. No, yeah. So Nationals, Braves, and maybe the Phillies now, and just before we move along, we know about Bryce Harper and the DH role. Castellanos in the regular season played 12 games, or was the DH in 12 games, and Schwarber in 15. So played, I guess, both those guys played a little bit more defense than I would have expected. But we had joked about that. Like, oh my
Again,
God, Phillies have the worst defense of all time.
And Bryce Harper I looked him up, 90 games as a DH. So
Yeah.
they still had to cover some games after those 3 were in
Right.
the DH role.
So I think what'll happen probably next year is, when Harper is healthy to go back in the field, then you're going to see Schwarber and Castellanos get more of the bulk of that.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to this last mailbag question of the episode, if I can pull it up right here. From Darren Hybert, he says, admittedly, this is a bit stuck in the past, but I want to call into question last year's free agent strategy for the Rays. It meant a lot to us as Rays fans that they offered $150 million to Freddie Freeman, but I didn't see any balls jacked out of right field as a result of the offer to his agent. Doesn't mean much if you don't close the deal, and I feel like they were shopping at the wrong dealership. While we were trying to make a deal on a shiny chromed out Ferrari, the Yankees were content to shop at the Lexus dealership. And when the Freeman deal fell through, Anthony Rizzo was already off the market, and we were stuck with platooning around Ji-Man Choi. Feels like we need a lefty slugger who knows when he shows up to the ballpark that he's putting on his gear and going to first base and mashing baseball. Should the Rays have pursued Rizzo instead of Freeman? And how would you guys solve first base for 2023?
I think the Rays will only push money if the variance of that player's performance is very, very low. So what I mean by that is they will give money to free agents if they are stable contributors. That just tells me that Anthony Rizzo, for them, the variance was a little bit too much for them to handle, giving him 20 mil a year, maybe 16. I know he got paid 16, but in order to win against the New York Yankees, I'm pretty sure Anthony Rizzo is going to ask more than 16 mil for the Rays. Again, it's tough to say as a fan, but the Trop, what it is and what it means for attendance, it's not like any player's number one destination is a free agent. Boy, when I am a free agent, I'm going to go to St. Pete.
Right.
Like, can we as a Rays fandom understand that? Yes, I get it. No state tax. That's amazing. Yeah, the beaches. Amazing. Oh, the weather. Oh, amazing. Fantastic. But they also have to care about where they work. They also have to, like the atmosphere. And is it banging? Is it bopping? It bops in October. Troptober, baby. That's nice.
Right.
But I mean,
it doesn't pop in June or July, that's for sure. And the other thing too is I don't really fault the Rays on the Rizzo thing because, first off, he had pretty widely said, and it was well known, that he liked the Yankees organization and wanted to return to the Yankees organization after was he traded this? He was traded from the Cubs to the Yankees, correct? Okay. Yeah. So, and again, we have to think of these players as people too. Do they really want to go from Chicago, New York to Florida in a span of a short period of time? I mean, I'm sure he's got a property in the Tampa Bay area, spring training with the Yankees and all that. But still, I think my point is taken there, that he didn't want to have to deal with a total change of scenery yet again. And, there's just ties with his parents are from New Jersey, and he's got a lot of family members up there too. So I don't really fault the Rays on swinging and missing at Anthony Rizzo. I just don't think they really had a pitch to swing at with him. And then after Freddie Freeman, putting all your eggs in the Freddie Freeman basket, it does make sense to a certain extent, because I mean, if we're strictly talking about first baseman, who else was really available on the market? Go down the list. Brad Miller,
Matt Olson, if by trade.
Okay, but just free agents.
Okay, so just free agents. I mean,
here's the list: Brad Miller, Yoshi Tsutsugo. Oh boy, that didn't end well. Ryan Zimmerman, who retired, Colin Moran, Daniel Vogelback, who actually probably would have been a really shrewd signing. I actually kind of surprised, like he signed with Pittsburgh, and Vogelback has put up good numbers over his career and has one of the best walk rates in all of baseball, and he has deep Florida ties too. He was born in Orlando and went to high school in the Fort Myers area. So, and lefty, so I feel like that could have been. He signed for like $1 million. Like he's been,
but he signed for 1 year, didn't he? So
yeah,
he's a free agent this year too.
I think there's a team option. There might be.
Okay, the Mets probably will pick.
But after that, there was nothing. Danny Santana, Albert Pujols, you weren't going to land him. Mike Ford, like there was nobody as far as first baseman. But if you're just looking for boppers, okay, yeah, Kyle Schwarber was on the market, but how confident were they in giving him a 4-year, $80 million deal?
Again, the variance was they don't want to put money if that player's production has a high variance. If it's a stable, if it's low variance, then they'll be like, okay, we're okay with putting money on Freddie Freeman's because he's going to be a silver slugger, gold glover type guy, so they're okay with that. But no,
I would have been cool with like a Jock Peterson, like 1-year prove it deal. But again, people would hem and haw and complain about that. Like, why are you going? Whatever. It's not like
first base though. Could you put Jock at first?
I don't. Yeah, that's the other thing too. I
mean, this question also. It's not like Darren's talking about 22, but Rizzo's available because he's going to opt out of that $16 million player option that he has with New York, so he's available. Vogelback could be available if the Mets don't pick up that option.
Which I think they're going to pick it up. I mean, whatever that, I would think.
I would think. Yeah. But I mean, so you've got Rizzo available again. Are they going to go for him?
Well, that's my question: is will the Rays spend at least $50 million on one single player this offseason?
So $50 million
total
contract. Least, so like they can add
a 4-year $50 million deal, 3-year $50 million. Will they give a number that high, at least that high, to a single player?
No.
So then they're not getting Anthony Rizzo, right?
Well, Anthony Rizzo signed for 2 years, $32 million.
Okay.
So could he maybe go for $240 this time around? Maybe 20 instead of 16 per year? Or does he want the years to guarantee himself? I don't know. I just feel like 50 is way too big of a number for one player. Collectively, I would say, yeah, probably. Collectively, and by collectively, I mean they signed a Michael Brantley and an Anthony Rizzo, a Jose Abreu and a Michael Brantley, a Jock Peterson, a Joey Gallo. I know a lot of Rays fans want Joey Gallo.
Yeah.
I
mean, with the shift rules changing, then maybe, Joey Gallo makes a little bit more sense when you add in the fact that, okay, he at least might have a fighting chance if he pulls the ball and it's not a home run. But my impression of Anthony Rizzo is if he's opting out, he wants a big payday. He wants as big as possible, no matter where that comes from. Is he going to get it?
I agree with you.
I would think
$4 million more. So 20. So for going from 16 to 20, it's not bad. But maybe the security is what he's looking for.
Yeah, the security and
interesting. I mean, the off season isn't even here yet, and we're having this much fun, Kevin.
Right. Yeah, he's 33 years old. So if I'm him and I'm opting out, I would think like I at least want a 3-year deal.
Yep.
3-4 year deal like this.
100%.
You want this is really your chance to cash in that last time.
Yep.
And I mean, I don't have his spray charts in front of me, but I would think that he benefited in New York. So might be to some extent a little bit of fool's gold, but still a terrific ball player that has so many accolades to his name and has done a lot of.
Do you know how many home runs he got this year?
32. 32 in 130 games and 548 plate appearances.
In Yankee Stadium, though, Darren. So 32 home runs at the Trop. What is that, 24? 25?
Something like that.
again, it's the most bop the Rays would have gotten this year.
Right.
So I'll give you that. But I mean, you do have to give them the Trop dent because it is
Yeah.
a pitcher's park. It's not, Yankee Stadium, fly, pop up, home run.
That is true. That is true. But that is, again, there'll be a lot of fun free agent and off-season topics and questions to dive into. We haven't even really gone through the full list of eligible free agents either. We've just kind of thrown out some names here and there of Michael Brantley, Jose Abreu, but there's other options and possibilities as well. All right. Thank you for those questions. Hopefully you enjoyed this Friday mailbag episode. It's the off season, but we're always going to find something to discuss and dive into. And we've got the player reviews coming up from the 2022 season. That's always a fun time. So be sure you keep listening to the Locked On Rays podcast, and make sure you make your second listen the Locked On Today podcast. That is also free and available on every single platform. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Stay safe, and we will talk to you next week.